everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am going to be talking through all the books that I read in the month of November. It was NaNoWriMo and NaNoWriMo during the month of November, so I kind of failed at both, but I did attempt both, so I feel like at the same time, maybe I didn't fail. Yeah, so anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today. I will do all of the stats at the end, so if that's something that you are interested in, then, either stay or feel free to skip forward to that. There are always timestamps in my wrap-ups, so if there's any book in particular that you are most interested in, feel free to jump around. You know how that all works. So, we always go in order that I wrote them down, which isn't always the order in which I read them or finished them. It's just kind of when I get around to putting them in my journal. But yeah, that's how we do things here. I didn't do any readathons technically in November. The only thing I did was NaNoWriMo, which wasn't technically a readathon. I will link Bethany's channel in the description below. Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany basically was saying that she felt a little bit of FOMO because she doesn't do NaNoWriMo, and so she decided that she wanted to do National Novel Reading Month in November instead of National Novel Writing Month in November. So the idea was that you select a certain number of pages that you wanted to read throughout the month, and that was where you were aiming. So 50,000 words written for NaNoWriMo is always the standard for NaNoWriMo. I went for obviously 50,000 words for NaNoWriMo and then 5,000 words for NaNoWriMo. I didn't complete that, but I did read some books. So, alright, anyway, let's start with the first book that I read, which was The Disappearance of Ember by Ambellin Kwaymullina. This is the book that I started the month with. I prioritised this book because it has been on a number of TBRs and I really wanted to finally read it. I didn't want to keep saying all year and even some of last year that I wanted to read this book and that I was super excited to continue the series and that I really enjoyed the first one and then just keep not reading it. So I did read it in November, finally did, and I really, really enjoyed it. So this is the second book in the Tribe trilogy by Ambellin Kwaymullina. I'm not going to go into detail about what happens in this book, but essentially it is a far distant dystopian Australia, basically. It's not specifically stated that it's Australia, but it's very obviously Australia. And we follow this group of kind of castaways, cast-outs. In this world, people have various different powers, sort of like, I guess, X-Men. So everyone has their own different type of power. So Ember has memory power. Ashala Wolf, who is the first person in the first book, has dream powers. So people have different powers. Not everyone has them. I shouldn't have said everyone. But those people that do have these powers are considered to be dangerous, considered to be, not a good type of people to have in your society. So they're outcasts, they are put into detention centres, and the Tribe are a group of mostly kind of teenagers who have escaped the authorities and are living in, what do they call them? A bunch of really, really old gum trees, basically. They do have a specific name for them, but I can't remember what it is. In this book, Ember disappears, as the name suggests, and Ashala Wolf is trying to find her, and there's a bunch of different secrets and different things to discover about Ember that she has been keeping from the Tribe and particularly from Ashala. I really, really enjoyed this one. I think that Ambellin Kwaymullina has an excellent writing style. I think that she is able to write this sort of mystery and give the reveals in a really interesting way, and it keeps you on your toes, it keeps you engaged and interested, but at the same time it's quite fast paced and there's quite a lot going on. There was a lot to unpack in this book. There was a lot of conversations around humanity and what it is to be human, and around different aspects of what humans are and how their emotions work and whether that is a good or a bad thing, whether it's beneficial or not. And I thought that was really interesting. It's definitely written for a young adult audience, so I think that in some respects, the writing style is quite simplistic, but it really works well in this book. As long as you know that you're reading for a younger audience, you don't feel like you're missing anything. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, I highly recommend this series. I've said this a number of times before, but if you enjoy Samantha Shannon's Bone season series, I think you'll enjoy this. They're quite different, but there's a vibe that I feel like is quite similar. So I gave this one a 7.86 on Corpile, which translates to 4 stars. So that was that. Next up, we have The Island of the Mad by Laurie R. King. This is the 15th, I think. Yes, it is the 15th book in the Mary Russell series, so I'm not going to go into detail about what goes on in this series very much, but to a certain extent, quite a lot of these books are the kind of serialized mysteries, so they are their own enclosed mystery in and of itself. However, the way that the characters develop and grow and what's going on in the world follows the linear time of the books. So this is a retelling of Sherlock Holmes, and we follow the main character, who is Mary Russell. Now, in the first book, The Beekeeper's Apprentice, Mary Russell was 15 and she was a very lonely teenager. Her parents died and she moved from San Francisco to Sussex in the UK, and she was with her aunt, who they didn't get along. She was very lonely, and one day she was wandering along the Sussex Downs and she literally ran into Sherlock Holmes, who at this point in time was technically retired, and he was a beekeeper. However, he wasn't really, in the strictest sense, retired. He was still doing a lot of work for the police, and he kind of takes Mary on as a apprentice. At this point in the series, she's no longer an apprentice. She is a woman in her, I think by this point she's in her late 20s. She has a theology degree, but she is still very much doing solving mysteries and crimes and different things like that. So yeah, I really enjoy this series. This is one of my favourite series of all time. Having said that though, I haven't finished it, so but this one held up for me. This one definitely still had that fantastic writing style. I love Laurie R. King's writing style. It's very intelligent, it's very in-depth, but not overly flowery. It's just precise and concise, but you really get a sense of the character. It is first person, and you really get a sense of who Mary is and how her mind works. She's an incredibly intelligent, academic, thoughtful person, and you really feel that as you're reading the books. You really get a real sense of who Mary is, what her beliefs are, and that is probably my favourite thing. Mary is one of my favourite characters in the world. But I love the way that she writes other characters as well. They're all from Mary's perspective, with the exception of occasionally in these later books we are switching to Sherlock's point of view, but then it is in third person, but that happens very occasionally. So this is taking place in Venice, and we are following Holmes and Russell as they try to investigate what has happened to one of Russell's friends from university's aunts and where she's disappeared to. And they get taken to Venice as a result in their investigations. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Like I said, absolutely fantastic. Love the way these are written. Absolutely wonderful. If you love character-driven stories and you love historical fiction and you love mysteries, definitely give these a try. They are wonderful as far as I'm concerned. So it is unsurprising, therefore, that I gave this book a 9.29 on Corpile, which is 5 stars. Next up, we have Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I buddy read this book with Sierra from Sierra the Book Addict, and as with anyone else, her channel is linked below. You should go and check her out, subscribe, all that stuff. I wanted to absolutely power through this book, but we were reading a certain amount of chapters every day for a week, so I couldn't, but I really, really wanted to. This is so amazing. I absolutely love this book. It was very confronting. It was very interesting. It was incredibly well written, and I just thought it was really, really interesting, and the way that it was woven together, all the different characters and the different situations and how it all came together and how the connections were made was really good, worked really, really, really well. So this book might be a bit close to home for quite a few people, depending on how you have been personally affected by COVID, how where you live has dealt with COVID. So this book is about the initial days and weeks of a pandemic, and then it is about, I think it's like 20 years later, there you go, 20 years later, and we're exploring what initially happens and how the pandemic very quickly has this effect on the world, and it's 99% fatal, so it kills a very large portion of the population of the world, and you see that through a few different characters' eyes. And then we follow 20 years later, and 20 years later we are following a woman who was a girl who was 8, I think, when it first touched down in the United States, and she manages to survive, and she has joined up with this travelling sort of players, so theatre. So we follow these different characters, and they're all kind of connected through a character who actually passes away very early on and isn't a victim of the pandemic, and they're all connected through him in a variety of different ways, but it's not particularly necessarily super important that this connection exists, but it's just really interesting the way that it's woven together. I really enjoyed Emily St. John's writing style. I thought that it was, again, reasonably direct and to the point, but very descriptive of when it needed to be, and yeah, just incredibly well written. Some of the parts of this were a little too well written, so like I said, if you have been personally very affected by COVID, then I would not read this book necessarily, but if you feel like you can handle it, so it's kind of, I guess, post-apocalyptic and kind of apocalyptic. But yeah, I would recommend if you can handle it, definitely. Fantastically well written. Definitely keen to read some more of Emily St. John Mandel's other works. I'm really intrigued to see what else she has done. In Core Pile, I gave this an 8.57, which works out at 4.5 stars. So definitely really, really enjoyed this one as well. The next book is The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. So this is the first book in what I believe will be a duology. What did I give it? I gave this a 6.71 in Core Pile, which is 3 stars. So there were elements of this book that I enjoyed. There were elements of this book that I thought could have been better written. Now, I did think that this was young adult, which would have explained the pacing to me. So this is paced a little bit strangely because at some points it's very fast paced and we get a lot of action happening very quickly. We don't have a lot of time to spend with the characters and to spend with the action and to see how it affects them, how it affects the world around them, and really get a sense of, yeah, how the action is affecting particularly the main character, which would have been good. I did think, like I said, it was young adult, so I did kind of excuse it for that because I feel like young adult needs to be quite a bit fast paced than a lot of adult necessarily needs to be, simply because teenagers, that's how they kind of think. Their brain is wired to be quite fast paced. There's a lot going on. Their experience in the world is they're growing a lot. They're going through a lot of changes. They're also, particularly these days, their attention span isn't necessarily as great. They need a lot more quick things happening. So that's why I kind of gave it leeway for that. But then I was watching Mara from Books Like Woe talk about this in a recent wrap-up, and she was saying that it is adult. And so I kind of don't excuse it for that, because I have no problem with books being fast-paced. I feel like Station 11 was very fast-paced, and it's a very short book as well. But we still really got to explore the characters and the effect of what was happening on them, whereas I didn't feel like we did with this very much. Like I said, a lot happened in this book, and I would have liked to have slowed down a bit and explored each thing a little bit more. Certainly have been able to figure out what was going on with Xingying a little bit more. So this is a retelling of the Chinese myth of the moon goddess. I do think that Su Lin Tan's, her imagination was really interesting. Like you could see that she had a lot of idea of what she wanted to show us. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm a little bit uncertain about this book. I liked some of it, and I didn't like others of it, as you can tell from the fact that I gave it 3 stars. I'm intrigued to read the second one, since there is a second one, and I think it's only going to be a duology, so I'm interested to read the second one, but I'm not like desperately can't wait for it, and I just don't know that this was as good as all the hype that it got. But it was still a fun read. It was still interesting enough that it kept my attention. I still wanted to know what was going on, and I was still somewhat invested. I just didn't think it could have been done better, I thought, basically. It is still an absolutely beautiful cover, so I'm going to keep hold of it for now, particularly until I decide whether I'm going to read the second one or not. But yeah, 3 stars. The next book that I want to talk to you about is Sugar by Carley Nugent. This is a young adult book, so it is also reasonably fast-paced, although having said that, it still manages to slow down when it's necessary. It still manages to really delve into the characters' feelings and the characters' emotions, like they're the same thing now, and what the character's thinking and their backstory, and it just feels like it did a better job of being quite fast-paced and telling you the story at a nice pace, but at the same time giving you a lot of background into the main character, whose name is Persephone, about what has happened to her, why she feels the way she does, how she feels, and yeah, her emotional state and her mental state, with the backdrop of 2 things. One, that it is fire season in, is she in somewhere in around Sydney, I think? Oh no, it's Victoria, country Victoria, I think. So it's fire season, summer, and there is a bushfire raging somewhere near to where she lives, and so there's constant information about the bushfires, and there's kind of warnings throughout the book about the fire and sort of what warning they're at, like what hazards they're at. See if I can find one. Yeah, so like evacuate now. So the warnings that they're getting through the news. So that's one of the things that's going on. But the other thing that's going on is that Persephone is diabetic. She was diagnosed approximately a year before, and it delves into how that's affected her from a mental point of view and an emotional point of view, but also just the physicality and just the fact of having diabetes, and now what she needs to do, and the fact that every single day, multiple times throughout the day, she has to test her sugar levels in her blood. She has to adjust for that. She always has to have insulin on hand, but she also always has to have like gummy bears or like different sugary things on hand. And she compares it to space. So there's something in here, can't remember exactly what it is, but there's something, she says there's something in like space. I'm doing a really great job of explaining what I'm trying to talk about. Let's see if I can find it. Bear with. I couldn't find it, but I remembered it. So she talks about the Goldilocks zone, which is apparently a term that is used in space exploration, and it's the amount of oxygen and other gases that the human body needs, and it's very small amount or very specific amount of these different gases in combination, and outside of the Goldilocks zone you die. And she compares her diabetes to the Goldilocks zone because there is a very small window of blood sugar that humans need to maintain in order to survive, and quite a large percentage of the population who don't have diabetes are always in this Goldilocks zone. However, anyone with diabetes is not in the Goldilocks zone, and so they have to constantly monitor it. So I found this really, really, really interesting. I am not diabetic, but it is Own Voices. The author is diabetic, and I really felt like it opened my eyes to a condition that a number of people do live with and that I didn't really know anything about. I've known of diabetes since I was, in early high school when I was reading the Babysitters Club books, but I've never really understood, even reading the Babysitters Club books, I've never really understood quite the extent to which this would affect someone's mental and emotional capacity. So yeah, really interesting book. I definitely suggest that you give it a go if it's something you're interested in. It is young adult, so, you know, bear that in mind, but I do think that it was very well written and, yeah, really good exploration of how all of these things tie together, and also grief to, yeah, affect this young girl's life. So in Compile, I ended up giving this a 6.86, which is 3.5 stars, but I think I'm going to up this to 4 stars because I did really enjoy it and I really feel like it was well written and it gave me that really interesting, like I said, it gave me a really interesting outlook into something that I didn't really understand. So yeah, I'm going to up it to 4 stars. And then the final book that I read in November was Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore. I should just actually say that Sugar and Winterkeep I technically finished in December, but I read the majority of both books in November, so I'm counting them both for November. So yeah, Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore. This is the 4th book in the Graceling series. I don't know why, but Kristen Cashore wrote Graceling, Fire and Bitter Blue like 10 years ago, and then this one came out in 2021, and then Seasborough, which is the next book, comes out, supposed to be sometime this month. Anyway, this is, like I said, the 4th book in that series, and this one is quite a bit different from the others. Well, they're all quite different from each other, but the other ones were from one person's perspective. This one is actually from multiple people's perspective. This is my favourite in the series, and I think it's a lot to do with the fact that it's from multiple perspectives. I really like that, particularly for fantasy. So we follow Bitter Blue, we follow a young woman called Lavisa, Gideon, who is one of the council from Graceling and a good friend of Bitter Blue's, and we follow a fox called Adventure Fox. So this is set, I think, like 10 years after the events of Bitter Blue, and there have been a lot of discoveries over time. So at the end of Bitter Blue, they found out something about a land that they hadn't known about before, and then this one they've discovered another part of the world they haven't known about before called Winterkeep. All of these books just have incredible nuanced conversations around all sorts of different things to do with social and political things, and they're just so incredibly well done, and like I said, very nuanced. This is the same. So in this one there's quite a bit of conversation around some environmental things that are happening. To be honest, actually it was a little bit on the nose. It was very obviously talking about nuclear power, but it was still well done. I think it kind of needed to be on the nose, like it needed to be very clear. But there's also a lot of nuanced conversation about abuse and about growing up in a family and how trauma can affect people and the way that they then behave themselves, how trauma can rewire the way that you look at the world and think about the world and your expectations of what is right or wrong. And yeah, like I said, very nuanced, very interesting conversation. I would definitely recommend this series. It's been absolutely amazing. We have had the live show for this, so this is a book that I'm reading with Beautifully Bookish Bethany and Cara from Wild Book Garden as my co-hosts, and then a bunch of other people who have been joining us as well. Yeah, we've had the live show for this one already. I will link it down below if you want to go and check out our full thoughts. But yeah, highly recommend, absolutely fantastic, beautifully written, very nuanced, really, really enjoyed this one. And I gave this one a 9.14, which is 5 stars as well. So those are all the books that I read. Let's now go through some stats. So my goal for NaNoWriMo, like I said, was 5,000 words. Pages, I should say. However, I read 2,413, 6 books. All of them were physical. For genres, I had 1 historical fiction, 1 dystopian, 1 fantasy, 1 apocalyptic, 1 contemporary. I had 3 young adult and 3 adult. My ratings average in Corpile I had 8.07, and for stars I had 4.16. My favourite book of the month was Island of the Mad, and my least favourite book of the month was Daughter of the Moon Goddess. But like I said, I still gave it a 3 stars. So I've been doing really, really well with my favourites and least favourites this year. I don't think I've had really any least favourites under 3 stars, with the exception of DNF. So I've been DNFing a lot more books that I just haven't been enjoying, rather than reading it and then rating it 1 or 2 stars. I've been enjoying doing that as well. But anyway, that is everything that I read in the month of November. Those are the stats as well. Please let me know how your November was. Did you have a good reading month? What did you read? What was your favourite book of the month? And what was your least favourite book of the month? Let me know all that in the comments below. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me a fox in honour of Adventure Fox from Winterkeep. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.